The fact that we have military personnel that witnessed multiple objects, and not only were they eyewitnesses personally, but we have it on official DoD video, it doesn't get better than that.
Suddenly, the object begins to rise into the air. And it has no wings. As the dogfight unfolds, he quickly turns and dives to bring his jet's nose ahead of the object to close the distance.
I lost it. Tim, you see it?
Suddenly, the tic-tac rockets past. It's gone beyond the horizon in the blink of an eye.
When one of the ship's fighter jets engaged a strange object in the sky, capturing footage of the incident on its infrared camera.
This is not some crazy person with their cell phone on Instagram, right? This is a $15 billion aircraft carrier with its radar systems.
Three amazing pieces of footage were released by the Pentagon.
Everything state of the art. What is that?
Evidence that extraterrestrials have visited our planet and are actually watching American aircraft carriers.
This feels like a really big story to me. It's not exactly clear why Vladimir Putin's more interesting than this.
Now, in this video, we're going to investigate the Tic Tac incident.
These are the witnesses of one of America's most unusual UFO encounters in history. Navy veterans and a band of brothers that want you to know that what they witnessed is real. This is their story.
Can you talk us through the technology that you witnessed?
If you can imagine a 47-foot-long tic-tac, they didn't have any wings, they didn't have any propulsion system.
Where a US Navy fighter pilot actually chased down a UFO until it shot off at unbelievable speed.
And the 2004 Nimitz incident is the best evidence we have to begin to answer that question.
Look at this. It's incredible.
It is absolutely, there it goes.
Look at that.
And in less than 2 seconds, it was gone. And you figure you're talking 50 miles of visibility, and you can easily see an object that size easily out to 10 miles, and it just disappeared in seconds.
Even now, even 13 years later, is there anything that you know of capable of this kind of behavior?
No, there's nothing I know of. I mean, when we saw the video with the IR, it has no exhaust. No discernible things of anything form of propulsion.
What is the truth that they're not telling you? Why is the government being so secretive about this? Why are these UFOs so interested in American aircraft carriers and not, say, for instance, CERN or the International Space Station? Why do you think the aliens that have mastered interstellar travel would have come all this way, would have the slightest interest in a large metal floating box? You know, it'd be like traveling interstellar distances to watch children play in a bathtub. These are things that mankind simply cannot explain, unless of course they think about them or understand what they're actually looking at.
We are going to use the same methodology here that I use in my conflict analysis. So before we can determine whether extraterrestrials have contacted mankind, we must first eliminate terrestrial technology as a source for what we see happening in our airspace.
Oh yes, UFOologists are in a league of their own, in literally making no effort to understand something, then being really amazed that no one can explain what they've seen.
And the 2004 Nimitz incident is the best evidence we have to begin to answer that question.
Look at this. It's incredible.
It is absolutely, there it goes.
Look at that.
Well, last week I looked at the first video released by the Pentagon, the Go Fast incident, which rather disappointingly turned out to be a duck or something. You know, all you really had to do was understand what the numbers on the display meant, and you could work it all out, with maybe the most simplest being the range to the object coming up as about 4 miles, which means, seeing as you know the field of view of the camera, you can work out that the object is about 1 meter long, about the size of a decent bird, and it's whizzing along because the plane is at about 20,000 feet, the bird at about 10,000 feet, and the plane is going past it at about the speed of sound. Now, I know what the UFOologists will be saying. How could these expert pilots not have identified such a simple phenomena as seeing a bird? Well, two obvious explanations spring to mind. The first is, they did. It's just not on the portion of the footage that was released.
Roger. There's troubleshooting as soon as I get... Can you box moving target? No, I took an auto track. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at it fly.
This is something that's going to come up again and again in these videos, as why does the video mysteriously cut off just as it's getting interesting? Seriously, what happened for the next minute of this encounter? Or are you really telling me that whoever leaked these videos didn't leak the most interesting part? Or it could of course just be that the pilots in this case were caught off guard by this. You know, it was just the first time they'd actually seen something like this, which happens surprisingly frequently. Allow me to give you an example. I would probably be considered an expert on infrared optics and infrared imaging. I know a lot about these cameras, but in the process of making this video, I decided I was going to get some infrared footage of the sky, and was stunned when a strange tic-tac shaped object floated gently into the field of view with no signs of propulsion.
If you can imagine a 47-foot-long tic-tac, they didn't have any wings, they didn't have any propulsion system.
Then I was amazed that as I became aware of this object, it suddenly deployed an infrared cloaking technology, and was stunned to see it just disappear. Defying the laws of physics, because there wasn't even a sonic boom. You know, maybe some sort of warp drive or teleport technology. Well, I could be telling the truth about everything there, and still be absolutely wrong about the conclusion. Now, the plane coming into land, the unidentified flying object in this case, that is the UFO in this case, certainly does vanish in the infrared. This footage is absolutely genuine. The rest you would just have to take my word for. But why should you distrust me? I accurately described what's on the video. Okay, so let's take a look at this a little more cynically. A tic-tac shaped object. What, you mean like the fuselage of a plane? That sort of tic-tac shaped object? You know, most planes viewed in profile do look kind of like tic-tacs. And small objects which are hard to locate, you know, when you're flipping, say, between looking at a computer display close at hand and the sky, are easy to lose. And all of this is because your eyes have a remarkably narrow field of high-definition vision. Give or take, hold both of your thumbs out at arm's length and put your thumbnails next to each other. That's about the field of high-resolution vision that you have. So why does it feel like you've got a great field of high-resolution vision? Well, it turns out your eyes are twitching around all the time, and your brain just stitches the image together such that it feels like you have a wide field of high-resolution vision. In reality, not so much. Now, points like this come across very clearly when you're, say, trying to locate the first star in the evening sky, and you lose it for a second. Trying to locate it again can be almost impossible unless you're looking directly at it. So small faint objects like this can be really hard to relocate, especially if there's a change in focus between the close object and the distant one. So yeah, I mean, it could quite easily be that when I was going between looking at the computer screen and looking up at the tic-tac shaped object that I saw, that I might have just lost track of it. And the rest, well, I just interpolated. I couldn't see it, therefore it must have shot off at hypersonic speeds. And, of course, it clearly shows evidence of an infrared cloaking device. Now let's say, for sake of argument, that I couldn't actually work it out myself. Yeah, I actually believed that I'd seen a UFO here and that aliens were among us.
Why is this not page one news everywhere?
Well, it should be, absolutely.
I could simply add the virtuous lie to this, that the CIA turned up and confiscated all of my computers.
Sir Voorhees has his own visit by unknown officials on the Princeton.
Well, they were plainclothes people that came aboard on the helicopter. It was my chain of command that took control of the tapes from me.
The link between the Tic Tacs and these men is unknown. How they became aware of the UFO encounters and how they arrived so quickly on board after the event is also a mystery.
But they just missed this little fragment of video. And the fact that they don't want you to know about the truth just shows what strong evidence this video actually is. Now, the irony is, quite a lot of what I've told you here is true. I was getting infrared video of the sky. In fact, what I was hoping to get, it was seeing what the heat signatures on the planes coming into land looked like. And what happened here blindsided me completely for about 3 seconds. Good. So this is the actual infrared footage. The first thing you've got to understand about thermal cameras is they've got this thermal range on them. So you can actually either increase the thermal range such that, you know, the dark is whatever, -20 and light is +20 or something. Or you can have a really narrow thermal range such that, you know, I can do this and I can find out which cars have been running more recently because they've got a hotter engine and which ones haven't. Or I can scroll it around and find out which cars, or expand it a little, find out which cars have been sitting in the sun and which ones haven't. So there's all sorts of things that I can actually tell from this. But we're mostly interested in this case in the sky. So I've got to rack this all the way over to everything's cold up in the sky here, right? It's a hot summer's day. So the ground here is, 20, 30 degrees. The clouds are 10-ish. Here is our tic-tac shaped object. So let's actually give ourselves a decent thermal range and we'll see what happens. And as the tic-tac object comes out, it vanishes. And then, oh, hang on. Then it reappears. And then it gets really bright. And then it gets really bright. And it's like, okay, maybe that wasn't cloaking. Maybe it was just really... Oh my God, it's vanished again. And it reappears again. At which point, you know instantly what's going on. Metal objects are super reflective in the infrared. So here's nice infrared footage of a passenger jet about to take off. And as it scrolls forwards, you'll be able to see the reflection of the flue gases on the fuselage because the metal is very shiny in the infrared. Our plane is cloaked here. Sorry, our UFO is cloaked here. Let me drop the thermal range down there. As he comes in, you will see there is absolutely no vanishing whatsoever. It's just an artifact of the plane's being really reflective. So basically, when it's over here, you're seeing the reflection of the sky, which is almost as cold as the camera can detect. So there's not much contrast. However, when it's reflecting off the clouds, there's much more contrast. If I didn't know what I was doing, there we go. Look at that. So it's going to be super bright, super bright, super bright. And, my God, it's gone. It's gone. It's engaged an infrared cloaking device. Yeah, I mean, so this is where it really does boil down to you can misinterpret all sorts of things on infrared. I've seen so many pieces of footage of just regular planes in the infrared being misidentified. Actually, I partially take that back. Actively not identified, because if it's not identified, then it's an unidentified flying object. You have a genuine UFO.
Released never-before-seen video from 2014 showing a mysterious flying object, of which they suggest could have been a UFO. The unknown object was seen flying at a constant speed, similar to that of the helicopter, and moving forward.
It's a plane. You're looking at the engines from behind, and all the rest is just basically flare from the hot engines.
In 2 instances, the object ejected some type of gas or liquid.
You sound surprised. You know, most engines burn fuel to give carbon dioxide and, what's the other thing? Oh yes, water.
You can see a massive plume of material trailing behind the object.
So, the plume could be hot or cold. If it's cold, then it's evaporating. You know, as you might expect from, say, for instance, a fuel dump. If it's hot, then it's condensing. Like, say, for instance, water that's just come out of the engine.
Moments later, a second ejection of the unspecified discharge. The flying object was visible for about 10 minutes before disappearing into the clouds without a trace.
And, as you can see, it's the same colour as the engines, so it's hot. Whether you get condensation trails depends on two factors: the temperature of the air and the amount of water that's currently dissolved in the air. You get the right temperature and the right humidity, and you put a load of water from the engines in there, it'll condense, and that condensation will appear hot. The water gas on itself tends to be fairly transparent in the infrared, but once it condenses into droplets, it appears much more visible, which is why on my thermal camera I can see the clouds but not the humidity in the air. So basically, the plane is climbing through a bit that is below the dew point to a bit that's very close to the dew point into a region where it's below the dew point, which is why you only get the condensation trail for a short period of time. It's not a common phenomena, but I've seen it several times myself on planes ascending.
What could it be? Was it a UFO? Air Force photo analysts confirmed that the three-dimensional object was real, with volume and showcased control in its movements.
Yes, that's normal for a plane, or when it's climbing.
They established that there was no evidence of hoaxing or alteration of the video by any computer application in the editing and processing of the images.
Why would there need to be? It's a plane ascending. I mean, if you just had the optical video, you would be able to see it.
Officials also ruled out a bird or flying insect, a drone, parachute, or a hang glider.
But curiously, not a plane climbing.
After an extensive study, the Committee for the Study of Anomalous Aerial Phenomena agreed it had all the characteristics to be classified as an unidentified aerial phenomenon.
What was that? The Committee for the Study of Anomalous Aerial Phenomena. Odd. When I Google that, I get nothing. But whatever, as long as they can't identify it, then you can call it an unidentified flying object rather than, say, for instance, I don't know, plane taking off. But with a video called Plane Taking Off, I think you would have struggled to get over 1 million hits on your video.
For FoxNews.com, I'm Rob Demetrius.
Now, the thing with thermal cameras is they're pretty good at telling you what the temperature of objects are, but it's got to make some assumptions about the properties of the object to do that. In this case, it's got to assume that they're kind of like black bodies. So this is actually a fairly good approximation for most things that you see here. So the ground's about 20 odd degrees. That's sort of fairly warm to the touch. The clouds, it's condensed water vapor at about, 6 degrees. The plane, because it's mostly a mirror, isn't really giving us a true sense of the temperature of the object. And because it's coming into land, the engines aren't going hell for leather, so the engines aren't putting out a lot of heat. Now, if the plane was putting out loads of heat, like when it's taking off or something, you would expect to see it to be much brighter. Or if it's a fighter plane flying around, you expect it to be much brighter in the infrared. So, 2 important take-home messages here. Number 1, be very wary when the video just mysteriously cuts off at exactly the right moment. What did happen next? And why didn't you release that? I mean, if this video is being released by people who want to show evidence for UFOs, why don't they leak the best footage? Yeah, rather than indiscreet fuzzy blob on infrared. Secondly, is the video footage is the only reliable portion of the evidence. If you're going to analyze that, and it turns out to be something mundane, it's about the size of a landing plane traveling at the speed of a landing plane, and it's kind of the shape of a plane. There's really not much point to debunking the remarkable stories when the evidence is for something thoroughly unremarkable.
Well, this thing did a barrel roll around his aircraft.
Really?
Then went straight down to the surface of the ocean. Anything biological would have been in that thing, given Newtonian physics, classical physics, it would have turned you into mush.
I mean, this is the crazy thing. If I had just released this footage alone, it would probably classify as one of the most credible UFO sightings on the planet. I mean, it was recorded by a scientist on a $10,000 thermal camera. And if you don't believe me, someone pointed me to this video where a camera failing to autofocus was being portrayed as aliens to 250,000 people who loved it.
UFO sightings in India have increased by nearly 800% in the last 10 days. Now you guys are sending me hundreds of emails with these UFO videos. I truly appreciate all of your support. UFO hotspot is Bangalore. And this next video is from Belgaum, Karnataka. Shows flashing lights again, vanishing and reappearing. It also shows how exciting it can be when you spot a UFO. Watch.
What the hell? What the hell is that thing?
When they zoom in, you can see the ring-shaped UFO. It appears to be a flying saucer. I received at least 50 emails, 50 videos from Bangalore alone.
Wow, that's amazing. I just worked out that I actually had a fleet of flying saucers in one of my earlier videos. And look, they jump all over the place. You can see their disc-shaped nature of these UFOs. And utterly unbelievable, if you zoom into the background, you find there is another fleet of flying saucers that are also strangely disc-shaped. You know, kind of like the camera's out of focus or something.
When they zoom in, you can see the ring-shaped UFO. It appears to be a flying saucer. I received at least 50 emails, 50 videos from Bangalore alone.
Damn, what a gullible breed.
Anyway, coming back to 3 of the most convincing and compelling videos of UFOs from the Pentagon.
And the 2004 Nimitz incident is the best evidence we have to begin to answer that question.
Look at this. It's incredible.
It is absolutely...
There it goes. Look at that.
So what the hell is this? This is the actual video evidence for the Tic Tac incident, which, let's be honest, looks like the infrared camera is tracking a plane at a distance. You know, that distant thermal signature from the F-18 infrared camera. And why does it look like a small fuzzy blob? Well, because it's a long way away. And why doesn't it look like a plane? Well, like I was saying earlier, with the infrared, you mostly see what's coming off in the way of heat. So, planes don't tend to look like planes, they tend to look more like what's coming out of the engines. Are you ready for the amazing proof that this is actually from another world?
The fact that we have military personnel that witnessed multiple objects, and not only were they eyewitnesses personally, but we have it on official DoD video, it doesn't get better than that.
So with that, set your expectations to stunned. You're about to see absolutely all of the video evidence for the Tic Tac incident. One of the most compelling and convincing UFOs ever, and some of the best evidence that aliens are among us. So let's familiarize ourselves briefly with what we have on the display here. The most important value is this one here. This is the field of view, which says narrow. Narrow means the field of view here is about 1.5 degrees. The moon, for reference, is about 0.5 degree. So you get about 3 full moons across the field of view at this magnification. However, when the zoom factor goes up by a factor of 2, the zoom factor will occasionally twitch between 1 and 2 here, then the field of view is only about 0.75 degree, which basically means the full moon would just about fill the entire field of view. And there's another one which you'll see is occasionally this will drop down to the wide field of view, which means that the field of view is about 6 degrees, although if it's got a 2 times zoom on it as well, then it's only 3 degrees or so. Other things you need to know, the plane is traveling at about half the speed of sound, Mach 0.5-ish, and it's relatively high, it's about 20,000 feet. The camera is pointing slightly upwards, whatever this object is. It is angularly slightly above the plane, and it's also to the right of the plane. It's 4 degrees to the right. That's where the camera pod is tracking. So if the plane's in the middle here, object starts off 4 degrees to the right, and you'll see it slowly drifts across in front of the plane. Now, the other thing you need to know is at the moment, the infrared is set up such that white is hot, right? So you can have 2 modes on this. You can have either black is hot or white is hot. You know, you can choose which to get the best contrast. Okay, so you ready for this? You're about to see some of the most amazing evidence for aliens ever. So we start off with the narrow field of view, and the object is obviously fairly distant. He does zoom in 2 times, I think, at which point you can see there's a load of optical artifacts, sort of crap on the lens and that sort of thing. Yeah, all that there is basically dust and dirt on the lens somewhere. Anyway, he swaps over and he gets much better contrast. This looks like a distant, hot object, kind of like a plane flying along. And it's moving across in front of our jet here. So at the moment, the camera is looking 1 degree to the left. So it's moved from, a couple of degrees left. And there, boom. When he starts swapping between the various camera views, you see that it almost loses the tracking. And the object moves. Oh, look at that. And he's got to reacquire it. That was the window on the front of the camera pod rotating. That's what all that weird stuff was. So we're now up to 5 degrees and we're still on the narrow field of view. So, this is about the size of the full moon. It's about the size of a distant plane. He's zoomed in a bit. And when he swaps between the camera views, he loses the tracking again. And that's it. That's it. That's the entirety of the video evidence for the Tic Tac incident.
Look at this. It's incredible.
It is absolutely. There it goes.
Look at that.
We're about to see the Tic Tac UFO incident account, which is, in my opinion, one of the most credible UFO accounts that there is.
I think I'm beginning to see why they needed to, how shall we say, augment this with reconstructions. That was their evidence. That's the actual evidence. So I've done a little augmented reality just to show you what's going on here. So on the top there, you've got the most important bit, which is, is the camera pointing to the left or to the right? There you've got roughly the cockpit, which is the direction the plane is going. It turns out it's not, it's slightly to the left. Don't worry about that too much. But the map that you have here is about real size. So the size of the moon and the size of the field of view of the camera is about right. So when he zooms in a factor of 2, you get half the field of view. And when he zooms out, then you get about twice the field of view. So at the moment, he's got about 3/4 of a degree of field of view. So you can see the size of the object relative to the moon. Now, the top camera assumes that the pod is tracking perfectly, and the bottom one assumes that the object stays in the middle of the field of view. So about now, when there's a little spasm, you get some idea of, just how little the pod had to twitch in order to keep the tracking. So that's when it almost loses the tracking on the object for the first time. Now, towards the end, what you'll see is he drops out to a wide field of view, then zooms straight back in, which is where the video cuts off. But what I want you to do is pay attention to the bottom video, which assumes that the camera pod just stops moving and you see that the object just moves out of the field of view as would be expected. Now, remember I told you, be super wary of video that cuts off at exactly the right moment, right? We know that this thing has up to a 6-degree field of view. So why don't we see what the pilot would have instinctively done, which is if you lost the object, you drop down to a lower magnification to reacquire the object. I mean, you see him do it merely a second before this. Clearly, it just takes a fraction of a second, but I'm just going to go out on a limb here and suggest that what you would see if you did that is you would just see the plane drifting along as it had always been drifting along, and you could have reacquired the object, and that would have been it. But for some reason, these UFO people who really want you to know that this is really good evidence for UFOs didn't show him dropping down to the wide field of view. Makes you think, doesn't it? Yeah, kind of reminds me of a lunar eclipse that I was videoing not so long ago. Into the light. So there's a huge temperature difference when you do that. Oh, wow. When all of a sudden I observed the moon jump about 1/4 of a degree to the left, then immediately back again. Now, there are two possible explanations for this.
Our moon is being subjected to some enormous force from outer space, a kind of energy beam.
That made the moon jump about 1,000 kilometers to the left, then immediately back again.
I estimate we have 11 days before our moon crashes down and destroys us.
Only Dr. Hans Zarkov, formerly at NASA, has provided any explanation.
I don't think we developed the technology. You know, I'm not going to talk little green men or any of that stuff. I'm just saying there's a lot out there that we don't know. Maybe there's some other stuff out there.
Or maybe, just maybe, the motor on the mount spasmed for a second.
Are extraterrestrials making contact with Earth, or is it something else?
I mean, it could have been either.
Difference when you do that. Oh, wow. Something's a little twitchy there.
I mean, but what about the eyewitnesses? They all report seeing Tic Tacs.
Suddenly, the Tic Tac rockets past as a Tic Tac object suddenly forms up on their E2 and then just as quickly shoots away from sight.
It doesn't have rotor wash. There's no propulsion. There's no wings. It rapidly accelerates and disappears. Like, poof, gone. Weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. I chased a UFO.
Yeah, great. And this is the best footage they got of it. Bizarre thing is, you listen to the eyewitness accounts, and it was all amazing. Blow your socks off.
He went following it down, and as soon as he went like that, this thing popped straight back out of the water, back up to 28,000 feet. What?
It literally gives me chills listening to this.
I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary.
Meanwhile, the best footage the F-18 Super Hornets in the Navy could get was a slightly twitchy camera mount on what looks like a distant plane. The evidence certainly contradicts the eyewitnesses that say they had no obvious signs of propulsion.
When we saw the video with the IR, it has no exhaust, no discernible things of anything form of propulsion.
It's clearly hot. It contradicts the eyewitness reports about it moving quickly.
Hey, this thing just turned on my nose. It's coming up.
And there's a bit of fear because now you're out there dealing with something that you have no idea what it is. It's actually reacting to what we're doing.
It clearly wasn't, and it contradicts the eyewitness reports about the pilot circling around.
Strange craft begins mirroring the turn rate of Fast Eagle.
287, 2 miles, Angels 5.
And it was only when they flew towards it that it shot off.
Commander is now about a mile away as he maneuvers his Hornet to get behind the unknown craft.
Meanwhile, the evidence shows the Super Hornet in straight, level flight. It's not doing any turns at all, and there is another object drifting across in front of it. Minus the contrails, it looks like two planes on slightly divergent courses. The sort of thing that is unremarkable in the skies almost anywhere in the world. Yeah, just a slight divergent course like that. The eyewitness pilot claims that he was flying his Super Hornet for an intercept, leading the object to where it was going to be.
I'm kind of pulling nose, to where he's going to be, and he's coming up. He just rapidly accelerates beyond anything that I've ever seen.
Whereas in the actual evidence, it shows that the object had just drifted off to the left. He was flying away from the object. Yeah, if his idea of flying to make an intercept is to fly in a perfectly straight line whilst the object drifts off towards the left, worst pilot ever.
Weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. I chased a UFO.
And only at the very end is there a slight twitch in the camera mount.
The fact that we have military personnel that witnessed multiple objects, and not only were they eyewitnesses personally, but we have it on official DoD video, it doesn't get better than that.
Look, there are guys out there with YouTube channels posting amazing videos from Super Hornet cockpits. But all these people claimed amazing visual sightings.
So from what you know about aerodynamics, mechanics, physics, should this be possible, what you saw?
Not with the technology that we have today.
But apparently none of them could operate a camera. Oh, sorry, I forgot. They had to delete everything because of some mysterious civilians, curiously leaving no evidence. Now, what a coincidence. Until, of course, this amazing video comes to light that corroborates their account completely, apart from all places where it completely opposes it. Hell, I got more interesting stuff when I pointed a thermal camera at the sky for about 20 minutes. Hell, check this out. I actually recorded an alien leaving Earth in a UFO and reaching orbit in about a second or so. Or it could have been a bee. Difficult to say. Maybe there's a lesson there about reaching for utterly incredible explanations.
I'm serious. Only this morning in the courtyard, I saw a horse with 2 heads and 2 bodies.
When there's a perfectly sensible, simple explanation directly to hand.
2 horses standing next to each other?
Yes, I suppose it could have been.
So, three amazing pieces of UFO footage were declassified by the Pentagon, confirming, maybe, that we're not alone. Well, we're now 2/3 the way through that amazing declassified footage. And what have we got so far? A duck and a slightly twitchy camera mount. Now, you might say, of course, if you're going to look at the evidence, then you're going to find out that it's BS. But isn't that the point? Millions of people will look at these videos and they'll be amazed at a UFO flying at hyperspeed over the ocean and a Super Hornet chasing down a UFO with otherworld technology. And the sad reality is, for everyone who watches this video and goes, so that's what it is, 100 will watch the UFO declassified videos and will think that that was credible evidence for alien spacecraft. Yeah, debunking disinformation and explaining why it's disinformation has always kind of been what this channel's been about. And for that, I really want to thank those who support this channel through Patreon. And it's because of folks like you that I can actually make videos like this with a really very nice infrared camera in the first place. So that just leaves UFO number 3. So what do you reckon this one's going to be? I mean, he says there is a whole fleet of them on the radar.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
That's no bird, and that's not a twitchy mount. So what the hell could it be? Well, if you want to find out, you're going to have to tune in next week. And if you don't want to miss out on great uploads like that, make sure you hit the notification bell. If you enjoyed the video, I'd be grateful if you dropped a thumbs up on it, at least so I can match the approval rating of people who misidentify out-of-focus cameras for UFOs. And if you really enjoyed this stuff, you can support this channel directly through Patreon, and I'll leave the links below. And as ever, thanks for watching.